You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy, Ott and Paul Stone as we wrap up a college football season, but let's get into some college hoops. And man, we had a good run last year in college hoops, but finishing off with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Paul, they remedied those mistakes, those penalties from their last game in Texas, where they scored on the first drive, but then penalty stopped their next three drives and a fourth drive in the second half. Well, they didn't commit any penalties on their first four drives. Touchdown, 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 touchdown. They finally committed a penalty on their fifth drive and had to settle for a field goal. So kind of the Buckeyes and that offense could only stop themselves. And your highest power-rated team throughout the season, was it maintained at the highest, still the number one power rating throughout the entire season, Paul? But we both agree the best roster, the best team ultimately won in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long college football season, obviously, that these teams are playing now, especially in the new 12-team format where these two teams, neither of which got a bye. So they played a 16-game schedule. So certainly there's going to be some ups and downs and some ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys and so forth. And Ohio State loses 2 games in the regular season. Notre Dame loses in week 2 to Northern Illinois. Neither of these teams would have made the previous 4-team playoffs. So I think that gives a little credence or credibility perhaps to the 12-team format, in its first year. But Ohio State, to me, and I kind of said all year, my mantra with Ohio State was if they get good quarterback play, they're the best team in college football at 21 of the 22 positions. And Will Howard, certainly in the playoffs, he took care of the football. He certainly took care of the football last night, completed his first 14, 15 passes, whatever it was, and he was on target, and not all the throws, just little short pitch and catches. So the cream rose to the top. Notre Dame had a great season, and they fought valiantly last night. They did not give up, and, Ohio State, they're leading by 8 late. That field goal certainly had ramifications for many people out there in the betting sphere. So 34-23 Ohio State, and the Buckeyes win that national title. And at least for the time being, the heat is off of Ryan Day in Columbus.
Oh, it's kind of like Auburn. It's either an extension or you're fired if you beat Alabama. I mean, you win the national championship, give them a raise and extension. If you don't win it all, well, we're going to run you out of town. So it's not. It's a high life in the life for a coach on a high expectation, high resource programs. But the one thing that's obvious, and that is it allows some room for error for some of the more talented teams. They're not in it last year in a 14 playoff. Simply put. And they stormed through this thing pretty good. I know Texas was 1 yard away. Ultimately, it shouldn't have been that close, in that one. And maybe Ohio State, after they kept their focus and and eliminated their mistakes and their penalties, maybe they lost their focus a little bit and their killer instinct and allowed it. Because once they got their focus back, they went down the field and they were on their way to score. All right, Paul, let's get to some college basketball and let's look in the ACC. And Wake Forest, this line is jumping around a little bit, but currently we've seen +1, 1.5, -1, -2. Currently at Bet Rivers, Wake Forest, the Demon Deacons at home in Winston-Salem are 1-point favorites over the Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think a lot of sports bettors, in my opinion anyway, mostly restrict themselves to betting on certain teams and don't closely examine betting against certain teams. And while I certainly like Wake Forest body of work to this point this season, this is more a play against North Carolina and its coach Hubert Davis. The grumbling certainly starting to grow louder there in Chapel Hill. They suffered one of their most disappointing losses in recent memory in their most recent game as they fell at home to Stanford 72-71. This past Saturday on January 18th, North Carolina dropped to an uncharacteristic 12-7 on the season. They seem to be in peril of missing the NCAA tournament for the second time in 3 years. That certainly will not sit well with the faithful there in Chapel Hill. On the other side, Wake Forest, they haven't been to the NCAA tournament since 2017, but they're 14-4 on the season. They've won 5 straight games, and they're off to kind of a quiet 6-1 start in ACC action. So Wake Forest up among the leaders in the ACC. They're playing tonight in Winston-Salem on Wake Forest home floor. Wake Forest has won the last 3 meetings between these teams there in Wake Forest. They're also 9-0 this year on their home floor. I think they make it 4 in a row over North Carolina. I think they make it 10-0 at home there in Winston-Salem. Give me Wake -1 over North Carolina.
At home court advantage is huge in college basketball, like no other sport. And 9-0 at home, why buck that one? So, and I think even with the significant line adjustment by the odds makers, it's still I still think it's a little light a lot of times. I would agree with that one as well. I'm going to a home team as well with the Tennessee Volunteers and against Mississippi State. Now, State is off of an emotional rivalry win in overtime against Ole Miss, giving the Rebels their first loss in this powerful SEC this year. The SEC, now we don't have historic NET numbers to go back too deep, but we do have the RPI. And I look at the conference RPI, and the SEC is on pace to have the highest conference RPI in the history of the sport. So it is, they've taken all of those resources and pumped some into the basketball side, and this is what we have right now. And if it's all about, the player budget, well, the player budgets, they have it if they want to spend it, and now they're spending it in the SEC. Tennessee, on the other hand, they lost their in-state rivalry on the road in Nashville. They were down 16 as late as 11 minutes to go and cut it down to 1 and had a free throw with just a couple of seconds to go to send it into overtime, but they misfired and they lose. So I love how they're going to bounce back in this one. Mississippi State coming off of an emotional win at home. So Tennessee -7 at home for my pick on that one. So I love the way they play defense. And boy, it's just Barnes has just done a heck of a job, man. His 4th different program that he's brought to the NCAA tournament. We're talking about Providence, Clemson, Texas, and Texas was his only Final Four trip to Texas, and they played a great regional final against Zach Edey and the Purdue Boilermakers, but just could not. I didn't think they got a favorable whistle in that game as well. Tennessee -7 pick there. Earn a chance at $10,000 in bonus credits with Bet Rivers prop packs. Place NBA same-game parlays to collect player card prop packs and earn rewards. You win based on how your player performs. Log into BetRivers.com with the BetRivers app to place your bet and get your pack. Let's stay in the SEC and go to Austin, Texas, Paul, and the Missouri Tigers coming in, and boy, they've had some nice road wins, including a nice road win at the Swamp down there and in Gainesville against the Florida Gators. Missouri here on the road is catching 1.5 at Texas.
Yeah, Missouri last year, if you recall, they ended the season on a 19-game losing streak. So they lost their last 19 games of the 2023-24 season. But what a difference a year makes. Dennis Gates there in Columbia has to be an early candidate for National Coach of the Year. The Tigers 15-3 on the season. They debuted at number 22 this week in the Associated Press poll. So they are now ranked. They are in the midst of a 4-game winning streak. And that winning streak highlighted by an 83-82 victory at Florida 1 week ago on January 14th. I think Florida is one of the better teams in the country, and this Missouri squad went in there and defeated the Gators in Gainesville. You look at this current 4-game win streak for Missouri, they have a 3-point specialist, a guy who began his career at Iowa State, Caleb Grill, and he actually comes off the bench for the Tigers, but he has been on fire during this 4-game win streak from three-point land. He is 14 of 27 from beyond the arc his last 4 games, so a little bit over 50%. He has certainly played a significant role in Missouri's current win streak. Texas, on the other hand, they've lost 4 of 5. They've got a great true freshman in Trey Johnson, who's an offensive machine, but not much else. Rodney Terry, they continue to struggle under his leadership, and his seat certainly has to be getting hot down there in Austin, Texas. I think Missouri's going to go into the Moody Center tonight in Austin and defeat Texas. I like Missouri plus 1.5 over Texas.
Yeah, Texas, he's a star, too. He's probably going to be a lottery pick, maybe a mid to late lottery pick. But, this is not a league to kind of just – if you don't have it figured out, it's not forgiving. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's move on. I got a money line parlay for you too. I've got all home teams here, and I was ready to pounce on that court storm fade, and Vandy certainly rushed the court in their win against Tennessee. But man, 12 and a half, 11 and a half, 12 and a half. It's been teetering back and forth at Bet Rivers right now. That's a lot of points to give to a quality team. Vanderbilt's going to the tournament. They are a tournament team, one of the team SEC teams that'll make it to the tournament. But I like Bama at home. Vandy coming off of that emotional win. I'm going to ride Tennessee as well, the money line. These are all home teams. These are all really good teams, well-coached teams. Oregon at home against Washington. Oregon lost a tough, low-scoring defensive battle at home against Purdue. And then Purdue, the other team, I was impressed with that game and impressed with Purdue on their little Pacific Northwest trip in the Big Ten. And boy, they brought a nice contingency of fans with them as well. Fell behind 8 in Seattle against Washington and destroyed them in the second half to win by double digits. And then win a tough game against Dana Altman's Ducks at Eugene. Very successful 3 halves to finish it with by Purdue. And man, their fans are getting into it. And man, they love their basketball in West Lafayette. So Purdue, Oregon, Bama, Tennessee, moneyline parlay. It's even money, minus 103 or so is what it is right now at Bet Rivers. So just a little money line parlay instead of, I'm not going to lay the number with those teams, minus Tennessee, but I did give them consideration, but I will put them together. I see it hard to find that one of these two teams are going to lose at home against much weaker competition. So your money line parlay there. And let's move on to your final pick for Tuesday. And we're looking at the new additions, one brand new addition and one relatively new addition to the Atlantic Coast Conference, and that's SMU and Louisville. Louisville going on the road to Dallas here. SMU laying 1.5 at home against the Cardinals.
Yeah, resurgent Louisville and ACC newcomer SMU. They're a pair of teams who are challenging for the league's number 2 spot behind Duke in the ACC in the early stages of the league race. First of all, Louisville, they seem to have found their man without question in first-year head coach Pat Kelsey. He's a guy who comes to the Derby City by way of Charleston. He led Charleston to a total of 58 victories over the previous 2 seasons, back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances, so did a great job there at Charleston, and now he's continuing to do great work there in Louisville. The Cardinals, they've won 8 games in a row. They debuted at number 25 in this week's Associated Press poll. First time they've been ranked in the poll since January of 2021. So it's been 4 years, but Kelsey has them back in the rankings. I hate to step in front of the train, but that's what I'm going to do here. This SMU team, they have quietly been sneaky good this season. They're off Mockingbird Lane on the hilltop, as they call it there in Dallas. And I'm going to back the Ponies tonight at Moody Coliseum. You've got an SMU team that's 14-4, and they have a quality first-year head coach of their own in Andy Enfield. I know listeners and yourself will remember Enfield from back in 2013 when he led Florida Gulf Coast to the Sweet 16. He most recently was head coach at Southern Cal, but he's going to do good things there at SMU. This is a program to watch. I know you know this, Jimmy, and others know it as well, but SMU has a lot of financial resources, and they're putting and dedicating those resources to athletics, especially with their move to the ACC. So I think we can expect some good things out of SMU in the coming years. You look at the Ponies, 3 of their 4 losses this season to pretty high-quality teams, those being Duke, North Carolina, and Mississippi State. Their 4th loss was to Butler earlier this year. They are in the favorable point spread role of being an unranked team favored over a ranked opponent. The Ponies lack a signature win really to this point this season. I think they get one tonight. I like SMU minus 1.5 over Louisville in ACC action.
All right, man, boy, they have embraced getting into a power league, huh? I mean, it is impressive, and for them to get a guy like Enfield is really strong. Now, look, Larry Brown probably their biggest catch, back in the day, but I mean, Enfield from USC, and that dunking machine that went to the Sweet 16 at Florida Gulf Coast. They were fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's move on to Wednesday and some of the projected lines. Let's start off in the Big Ten, and one of my handicapping angles, Paul, is For instance, in football, I'll give you an example. I watched the Tulane-Kansas State game. And early on, and Tulane's not a traditional power team, but for their conference, they've been pretty good the last few years with Willie Fritz, and it's continued with their new coach. But against Kansas State, and Kansas State was respected this year. There's no doubt. They could have and maybe should have. Well, certainly could have and maybe should have won that game against Kansas State, but they lost. They lost, and so people weren't alerted quite as much. Their power rating wasn't shifted quite as much. So in a loss, man, a respectable loss, I look for those teams, and I thought I got more favorable numbers moving forward, and we cashed a lot of tickets over the course of the season with Tulane. Game on Sunday, what I watched closely was Northwestern at Michigan, and we all can say that Michigan certainly upgraded with their coach. And again, Dusty May from Florida Atlantic, and he brought his big guy over with him as well. And man, Northwestern could have easily been, I mean, it was a classic 50-50 game. They lose in overtime by 4. But I was impressed in this loss. So Indiana, because they bounced back after getting humiliated and booed at home at Assembly Hall, and went on the road and come from behind fashion against Ohio State, which is one of the weaker teams in the Big Ten. I don't think all of their problems are cured all of a sudden. So Northwestern at home, certainly the branding. They always get excited in Evanston to host the Hoosiers. So I like Northwestern minus a 4 based on an impressive loss that I saw on Sunday against Michigan at Ann Arbor, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add something to Northwestern. They have got a really, he's not really all that highly acclaimed, but they've got a 6'6" guard, Brooks Barnhizer. A guy who's an off guard, but he does everything. I mean, I'm looking at his averages here. Averages 18.4 points per game, 9.3 rebounds. Not only their top scorer, he averages 4.1 assists, 1.3 blocks, and 2.2 steals. So Barnhizer is a potential first-team all Big Ten selection, and he's really been making things go. And I especially like to back teams who have a player playing at a high level, as Barnhizer is. He's off back-to-back 20-point performances. So I think Northwestern's going to get their, have their way with Indiana as well.
All right, those are projected lines right now that we have that we're looking at sort of the different numbers. And Paul does a great job and is very accurate within a half point or a point on a lot of these. Paul, this is one of your picks, and you're going deep into the pocket with this one. But the Youngstown State and Robert Morris. Youngstown State at home projected to be 3-point favorites over Robert Morris.
I'll tell you, Jimmy, it just doesn't seem like we've talked enough Horizon League the last couple of years. So we're going to go and look at this matchup. Two teams separated by only 65 miles, Youngstown State and Robert Morris there in Pittsburgh. But Youngstown currently in third place in the league at 7-3, but they've lost 2 of their last 3. Lost at home by 8 to league leader Cleveland State, and then by 15 at Milwaukee. The teams are meeting for the second time this year. The first meeting actually won by Youngstown at Robert Morris by a 72-58 margin. I'm projecting Youngstown to be a 3-point favorite here. And one of the main reasons that I like Youngstown to complete the regular season sweep over Robert Morris is the scheduling spot for the Colonels. Robert Morris is playing their third road game in 5 days. They're not only playing their third road game in 5 days, they won the first 2. So very difficult, I think, to win 3 road games in 5 days. I'm going to take Youngstown State minus a projected 3 points over Robert Morris tomorrow in the Horizon League.
All right. It wouldn't be a podcast with myself and Paul Stone, especially on a wintry conditions over there. That's right. That's palm tree. That's not just Max with a fan out in the backyard, doing the special effects. Okay. I mean, there's palm trees and heavy snow that's falling in South Louisiana here in Baton Rouge right now. Let's go to one at Ole Miss and A&M. And this one, I gotta scratch my head on this. I like to give in what are going to be arenas or gyms that are going to be popping. I mean, a really good home court advantage. I like to give 5 points to the home team. Well, this line is only 3 at home. Ole Miss, just put it quite frankly, there's nobody that covers this league, covers college basketball, that's going to put A&M on par with Ole Miss. Ole Miss is better. We know that Buzz Peterson is pretty good, but Chris Beard is better. I mean, he is really good. It's something about kind of knowing, kind of getting comfortable with his new surroundings 1 year and building on it for the future. So he's got that 1 year under his belt last year, and now he moves forward. And look, Ole Miss is also 5-0 against the spread in conference play. So the odds makers are a little slow to warm up to the Rebs because they are way better than they traditionally are. They've never been to the Final Four, not even close. And so -3 at home, I think, is a really short figure. Look at the stats for Ole Miss. You look at my man Malik Dia, okay? The Vandy, Belmont, Ole Miss transfer. He's the 6th leading scorer for the Ole Miss Rebels. Paul, I sat there in Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa, Alabama last Tuesday night and watched Malik Dia. He ain't the 6th best player on his team. He's averaging 23. In that game, he had 23 points and 19 rebounds. He's a big body guy, 6'9", 250, with very soft hands. And he's a below-the-rim player. He's not going to have these high-flying dunks. He doesn't even elevate on his jump. There is no jump shot. It is an old-school set shot. But 20.7 rebounds he's averaging in conference play. So it's a team with all these new pieces that a really good coach is kind of getting them to come together and playing congruently right now. I think this team is power rated extremely low. And there's another one. In a loss, man, I gained a lot of respect. I thought that was a tough spot to go. Rivalry game at the hump against Mississippi State. They go to overtime and lose close. They do cover it, however. Like I said, 5-0 in conference play. I got Ole Miss at home -3 against the Texas A&M Aggies. And, Paul, I know you like the same. It's a double-barrel pick.
Yeah, and I'm with you here. Sometimes when a team loses, it's very difficult, as you've mentioned on multiple times during just today's podcast, very difficult to go into a hostile environment and compete and win or challenge for victory on the opposition's home court, especially when there's a raucous home court edge with the crowd. This is a situation where we've got the lower-ranked team, number 16, Ole Miss, favored or projected to be, and they'll certainly be favored, but we project them as a 3-point home favorite over the higher-ranked team, number 13, Texas A&M, tomorrow on Wednesday, January 22nd. You mentioned the Rebels coming off that hard-fought 84-81 overtime loss at Mississippi State. One of the things I liked about it was the Rebels, they fell behind 11-0. So Mississippi State scored the first 11 points of the game, and the Bulldogs still led by 14 with under 2 minutes left in the first half. So they really had to dig themselves out of a hole on the road against a quality opponent, and they were able to rally to force this game to overtime. 4 days earlier, you talked about the game you were at there in Tuscaloosa. They stunned 4th-ranked Alabama 74-64. And former Texas Tech and Texas head coach Chris Beard, he can coach a little bit. I think that's undebatable. And he's already on the verge of doing special things there in Oxford. And we're on the same page in more ways than one here. My talking points, not only am I recommending Mississippi, but I made some talking points about the man who spent a little time there in Nashville, who you referenced, Malik Dia, played at Belmont last season and was at Vanderbilt before that. But prior to the Mississippi State game this past weekend, in a 3-game stretch against Arkansas, LSU, and Alabama, Dia averaged 21 points, 11.3 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks. So he is a force. He's a 6'10 guy, 250 pounds. Ole Miss is going to be an interesting team to watch the rest of the regular season and into the tournament. And you mentioned the SEC, perhaps being the highest rated league in contemporary history. And it's odd to think in those terms because it wasn't, but probably maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago at the most, for the SEC was the weakest Power 5 league out there. But, how things have changed. This is there's just no easy outs in this league at all. It is a extremely talented and extremely interesting league. But I think Texas A&M, for all their high rankings and acclaim, I think they're overrated. I think just a little bit, not a whole lot, but you look at their 3 true road games this year. They lost by 3 at Central Florida in their season opener, lost by 12 at Kentucky last week, I guess it was. And then in their only road victory of the year, they had to overcome an 18-point second half deficit to defeat Oklahoma by 2. So I think Ole Miss, they're going to rebound here. They're going to come up big and get the victory. I like Ole Miss projected -3 over A&M on Wednesday.
I'll go some history with Malik Dia too. Some below the rim players that have led their teams to the Final Four, and just last year with DJ Burns out of NC State. These big guys, and all 4 of these guys, what I saw with Dia as well as big guys, but got soft hands and really soft touch around the rim. Dimitri Hill, the Demet Hook, who led the Florida Gators to the Final Four back in the day with Glenn Big Baby Davis for LSU. All below the rim players, but all close. D has got that. He's wide, man, and he's got that. He's very, very soft and very proficient and accurate around the rim. So a lot of these guys, big, thick guys, but real soft hands around the rim to just kind of think about that. So we're going to be doing a college basketball once a week. We'll look at the Tuesday and Wednesday schedule. We'll also throw in some opinions if we have on some of the futures as well. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on a snowy Baton Rouge, blistering Baton Rouge, here on the Bet Rivers Network.